Listen, if you're new, or I haven't had the chance to meet you, my name is Jesse, and if you're new, I am not our lead pastor. I have the joy and privilege of being our next gen pastor, and if you're not familiar with what that word means, it just means I am the kids pastor and the youth pastor all rolled into one, and so my job is a whole lot of fun. And I often get asked, hey, what is your favorite age group to work with? Because I get to work with little babies as soon as they're born, all the way up to when teenagers graduate high school. And that's almost an impossible question, because there are things I like about every age and every phase. But I will be honest with you, super honesty time, I do have one age that I'm maybe the most passionate about, and it might surprise you. I actually am probably the most passionate about ministering to the middle schoolers. And you might say, some of you clap because you're like, thank goodness for people like you, because that's not me. I mean, that is when they are the stinkiest. For some reason, they haven't learned how to use deodorant yet. Everyone's got a mouthful of braces, and everyone's awkward. I love hanging out with middle schoolers at that age, because the reality is we all remember middle school, and middle school kind of sucks sometimes. I remember when I was in 7th grade, I had just moved to a new school, so you take the awkward of middle school and add new school, and 7th grade was kind of a tough year for me. This is also around the time that I really started to pay attention to the girls in class. So there was one girl in particular I was kind of interested in, and so anytime there was an opportunity or a project, I was always try to like sit by her or be around her, try to make her laugh. And so one day we were sitting in the computer lab, because those used to be a thing, and we were working on some project, and of course I'm trying to lay on the charm, and again, I'm 7th grade, so I have no idea how to do that. And it comes off a little weird and a little awkward, and I remember she laughed, but laughed not in a way that I was hoping. And she said, Jesse, you are just so awkward. You're like an Akko taco. And what I don't think she meant was, Jesse, I just have made some observations about you that, you are probably just an introverted kind of person, Small talk probably isn't your thing. If you were to ever take a Myers-Briggs personality test, you're probably an INTJ. If you were to take the Enneagram quiz, you're probably like a 5, which just means you're probably more of a thinker than you are a talker. And so I just acknowledge your differences and just appreciate what you bring to this social dynamic. I don't think that's what she meant. I think she meant that I was making her uncomfortable, which made me want to implode with embarrassment. But the tough part about that is that she was actually right. I am introverted. Any other Enneagram 5s in the room? I'm gonna say, they're here, they just don't want you to know they're here. And so small talk isn't my thing, but the reality is that her words stung. And it was at that moment, and you've had moments like this, where I realized as a child, I was told a lie over and over and over again. And I'm willing to bet you were told the same exact lie. And that is, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. That is probably the biggest lie we were all told as children. Because the reality is that I would argue that words hurt more than any broken bone ever will. Because you see, when you break your arm, you can go to the urgent care, you can go to the ER, they'll take an x-ray, maybe an MRI, they can pretty quickly get a full picture of the damage that has been done. They can splint it, they can put you in a cast, they can put you in a sling, and then in most cases, 4, 6, 8 weeks later, you're more or less back to normal. But in a lot of cases for us, it'll take years for us to realize even the damage that has been done by words that have been said to us, let alone heal from it. And the reality is that words are really powerful. So if you're just joining us, or maybe you haven't been here in a few weeks, we're right in the middle of a series called Word to the Wise, where we are taking a 5-week journey through the book of James and hoping that as we allow his words to get into our hearts and into our minds, that we'll come out the other side maybe a little wiser and a little more mature. And when we arrive in James chapter 3, James might be the first person to call out the fact that sticks and stones might be a lie. He might have been the first person to call that out, because James chapter 3 is all about words. So if you've got your Bible with you, or maybe your app, you've got an iPhone that's got YouVersion, go ahead and get that out. Go with me to James chapter 3. If you've got an Android or maybe a Google Pixel, turn it off. And please, if you hear nothing else, please stop making our iMessage green. And I tell you that in love. Anyway, James chapter 3. Let's jump right into it. Today I've got two kind of thoughts and then two tips. So let's jump in. James chapter 3, starting in verse 1, he says, "Dear brothers and sisters, not many of you should become teachers in the church, for we who teach will be judged more strictly. Indeed, we all make many mistakes. For if we could control our tongues, we would be perfect and could also control ourselves in every other way. We can make a large horse go wherever we want by means of a small bit in its mouth. And a small rudder makes a huge ship turn wherever the pilot chooses to go, even though the winds are strong. In the same way, your tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches." And so right off the bat, James wants us to get a clear picture that in the same way a bit in a horse's mouth and a rudder on a ship seems like a small and potentially insignificant thing, our words are the same. That even though they seem small, even though they seem insignificant, they have extreme power. And I love that he compares it to a bit in the horse's mouth. Are there any like horse people in the room? You got, okay, like 3 of us? Cool. Well, for the rest of us, my horse career, my horsing around career is limited to really one experience when I was in high school. I had a friend, her name was Allie, and she had horses. And so when I'd go over to her house, we'd kind of hang out with the horses because that's what you do when you have horses. And we were talking, and it occurred to her that I had never ridden a full-size horse. When I was a kid, I had like ridden some ponies and stuff at the fair, but I had never ridden a full-sized horse. And so she was like, well, we got to change that right now. And I was down for it. So she goes, gets the saddle, puts it on, gives me this helmet that is entirely too small for my head. I looked like a thumb with 2 thumbs, even more than I do now. And she said, climb up on there, and I'm going to let go of the lead. You just hold on to the reins. And what the horse will do is it'll follow around the fence in this little like corral area. It'll follow, it'll do the loop. The horse knows what to do. All you need to worry about is balancing. And I'm going to tell you right now, that was not true. That is not all I had to worry about. So the horse starts going as if by magic. I have no idea what I'm doing, if I'm doing anything to make the horse move. She's going, and all of a sudden I realize, okay, riding a horse looks way more comfortable on TV. Anybody ever ridden a horse? You realize, like, they are like this. So we get to the other side of the field, and I don't know what happened, if she was setting me up for a practical joke or something, but we are as far away as we could possibly be, like 3/4 of a football field away. The horse turns its head to the left, sees my friend Allie, her owner, and decides, I don't like being this far away from her, and takes off running across the field after her. And immediately I am struck with terror because not only am I struggling to balance as it is, I have no idea how to stop this thing. This horse is not horsing properly, and I think, man, this horse is either gonna plow through this fence or it's gonna jump it and just carry me clear to Pennsylvania, where I'm gonna have to take up a life as a cowboy and live on the range with me and this new horse. And thank the Lord, the horse came to a stop. Obviously, terror and fear was all over my face. My friend was bent over laughing at me. And she said, hey, why didn't you just pull on the reins? And I said, what does that mean? I don't understand. She goes, yeah, when the horse was over there and it turned its head, all you would have had to do is pull the rein back to the right so she wasn't looking at me and she would have kept going. And I'm like, that would have been excellent information to have 30 seconds ago. It's kind of useless to me now. And so she kind of explained how, hey, yeah, there's this whole thing called a bit that goes in the horse's mouth. It's this little metal bar, and by that, you can actually turn the horse's head. And once my adrenaline levels came back down to a normal level, I was actually like, that's kind of sweet. Like even small children can control horses that are 6, 7, 8 times their size and way stronger by simply controlling its mouth. And James is saying, hey, your mouth is the exact same way. The words that you say matter. And I would say it this way, maybe you will write this down. Your tongue has directional power. Your tongue has directional power. The words you say about yourself will affect the person you become. How you talk about the situation you are in will change the way you interact with that situation. I'll maybe say it this way: you show me your words and I'll show you your future. Because if we're standing here saying, man, constantly, man, I'm not good enough, I screw up everything I touch, that's probably gonna fix your focus on all the ways you are messing up. And so all you're gonna see is all your failures. You know who I think actually understands the power of the tongue maybe better than anyone, especially when it comes to the directional power and the directional momentum that your tongue can have, is actually coaches. I'm not much of a sports person, and you may not be either, but I'm sure most of us remember a few years ago in 2016 when the Cleveland Cavaliers came back from a 3-1 deficit to win the finals. And there's a few moments in that whole story that I want to point out to you may not be aware of. So just for us non-sports people, I researched for you so that you can be up to speed on the story. So the way the finals work, the championship series is a 7-game series, meaning it's the first team to win 4 games wins. And after game 4, the Cleveland Cavaliers were down 3-1 to the Golden State Warriors. And no time in NBA history before that had a team ever come back from being down or from being that far behind. And so the Cleveland Cavaliers were getting ready to board their private jet to go out to play Golden State for game 5. Again, this is a must-win situation for the Cleveland Cavaliers. And the head coach at the time, Ty Lue, gave a little speech, kind of a Ted Lasso style. There's like 4 of us that have watched that. I promise you, after this afternoon, Ted Lasso, Apple TV, you'll thank me later. It's a great show. But he gives this speech. He gathers all the players, LeBron James, Kyrie Irving, all the coaching staff, all the trainers, and he says, hey, we have to win this game. He said, so I want everybody to know right now, if you don't have it in your head that we're gonna win, don't get on the plane. I would rather you not come if you're in your head thinking there's no way we can win this game. What is he doing? He is setting the tone and the directional momentum with his words. So they win game 5. Series is now 3-2. They're in the Golden State visitors' locker room. They are still 2 games behind. They're getting ready to fly back to Cleveland for game 6. Again, another one. They have to win to force the series into a game 7. And Coach Ty Lue, again, I imagine him like Ted Lasso, polo shirt, tucked into his khakis, big Believe sign behind him. I promise, go home and watch the show. You'll understand what that means. And he goes around the locker room. We get to LeBron James, Kevin Love, J.R. Smith. He says, everybody give me $200. $200, which I think is a pretty insignificant amount of money for people that are making millions, but whatever. He collects $200 from everyone and then gets up in front of everybody and says, hey, listen, we're about to go home. We've got a game 6 that we have to win. This is what we are going to do. We are going to go home. We are going to win game 6. We are going to force a game 7 where we come back right here to this spot right now, takes that money, hides it in the drop ceiling, and he says, we're coming back for our money and we're coming back for the championship. And that's exactly what they did. And man, I'm not a sports person, but when I was reading the interviews and the story about that this week, I was getting some goosebumps, like, whoo! It gets me excited. Why? Because words have directional power. How lame would it have been if Coach Ty had said, hopefully we win. I don't know, the odds are stacked against us. No team in history has ever come back from 3-1. No, he said, no, this is what we are going to do. This is what we are setting out to do. And I just want to ask you, how do you talk about your life? Do you talk about your life the way a coach would? Because I'm willing to bet that a lot of us don't do that. We've got to understand that our tongue has directional power. And wherever there is power, there's also potential. And so James continues at the second half of verse 5. He says this, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And among all the parts of the body, the tongue is a flame of fire. It is a whole world of wickedness, corrupting your entire body. It can set your whole life on fire, for it is set on fire by hell itself. And I think probably all of us at one time in our life or another have experienced that last sentence come true in our life, where by our words it can set our whole life on fire. You ever say something in a moment of frustration and you immediately are like, oh no, come back. And then you just have to watch as those words blow up in your face. He's saying your words have destructive potential. Your tongue has destructive potential. Maybe you write that down. That's our second idea. And I actually really love the way the Message paraphrase puts this verse. This is what the Message paraphrase says. It only takes a spark, remember, to set off a forest fire. A careless or wrongly placed word out of your mouth can do that. By our speech, we can ruin the world, turn harmony to chaos, throw mud on a reputation, send the whole world up in smoke and go up in smoke with it. Smoke right from the pit of hell. You know, when I read that, it's almost as if James is explaining America in 2024. You know, a lot of people will say that, hey, this is the most divided our country has ever been. And I don't know if that's true. I maybe haven't lived long enough to be able to speak to that. But I do think there are two significant things that are contributing to the way our culture is right now. And the first one is we have more access to words now than we ever have before. There are more news outlets now that are going 24/7, constantly giving us narration of every possible event that is happening in the world right now. And on top of that, we have an endless cesspit of everyone's 2 cents on everything on social media. We have more access to words now than ever before, and maybe you pair that with potentially now, today, we are more careless with our words than we ever have been before. And I think you pair those two things together and you get what we got. And as James would say, brothers and sisters, this should be different for us. In a world full of mudslinging and reputation trashing and being reckless and careless with our words, as followers of Christ, we should stand out as different. If there's anybody in culture that should understand the power of words, it should be us, because you see, you and I believe that we were created in the image of God, and that God spoke the earth into existence. And if we are created in His image, maybe we should understand our words have power too. And can I tell you, just maybe a little pet peeve I have when it comes to some of the stuff that we say and I catch myself saying? If you're here today and you are a follower of Christ, can I challenge you to never say these couple phrases? Don't ever say, man, I just don't have a filter. Man, the first thing that comes to my mind, I say. Man, at work, I ruffle feathers because I just call it how I see it. And that makes people mad. Can I maybe just suggest that what we do when we say things like, I don't have a filter, is we are using words as a permission slip to be careless and reckless. And it may not be that we don't have a filter, maybe we just lack discipline. We have got to be careful with our words because they have destructive potential. And when thinking about it, I kind of got this image in my head of a bull in a china shop. And so I brought a picture, courtesy of AI. I don't know if you know this, but people don't let bulls in china shops very often, so there's not many pictures of it. So I had to rely on AI. But I think if we were to be honest and take a step back and reflect on some of the words that we say, this might be an accurate depiction. That we just say what comes to our mind. We don't really care what it knocks over, what it bumps into, what it breaks, what it hurts, what it harms. Just everything is going to have to make space for us. And I get when you have something on your mind, say it and say the truth. And the Bible does say the truth, right? The Bible also says say the truth in love. And so many of us want to sound smart and witty and quick with our words. And maybe, hey, people are going to think I'm wise because of the smart stuff I say. Well, maybe some of us need to remember that wisdom and maturity isn't found always in the smart stuff you say, but it's in what you choose not to say. And there's a saying I heard a few years ago that I like so much, I just kind of adopted into, hey, this is some sayings. This is one of the sayings I want to guide my life, and it's this. You know, a wise man once said, nothing. I don't know about you, but I think we could use a little bit more of that. I think sometimes I could use a little bit more of that. And I don't want to be a bull in a china shop when it comes to the way I use my words. And I was thinking about it, talking about how James is saying that our tongue is kind of what guides and steers our life. And I was thinking about the bull in a china shop, and then it hit me. You know what happens when you take that same exact animal, you give it to a farmer puts a yoke around its neck that can steer it and guide it and direct it, becomes an ox that plows fields, plants seeds, and will eventually produce a harvest. That can be true of your tongue. Because if it's got destructive potential, maybe it also has constructive potential. And instead of a spark that sets a forest on fire and makes your life explode in front of your eyes, maybe it could be the spark that sets your life on fire with passion and purpose for Jesus. And so I don't know if you've thought about it this way, but your tongue is some bull stuff. Some of you got nervous there for a second. Maybe just turn to your neighbor. Tell them that. Your tongue is some bull stuff. Be careful, we're talking about taming the tongue here. And that sounds silly, but I hope it's going to make you remember this. Because we can be one or the other. We can be reckless and careless, leaving behind us a trail of broken relationships and hurt feelings, and then come back around and say, Jesus loves you. Or with our words, we can plow and plant seeds that are going to eventually produce crop and produce harvest in our lives and in other people's lives. And so, with our remaining time, I want to give you 2 tips on how we can yoke our tongues. The same way a farmer can yoke an oxen and steer and direct, the same way a bit in the mouth of a horse can lead a horse that is much bigger than the rider. There are ways we can direct our tongue. And so I have just 2 thoughts. It's not limited to these, but these are 2 that I think are really important. And I'm going to apologize to you right now. These are going to sound so insultingly simple. But for me, in my own experience and what I've observed in others, it's not the deep, complex theological debates that lead to us becoming wise and mature, but it's in us actually doing the simple. And so the first tip in yoking our tongue, very simple, encouragement. We should be using our words to encourage others. I told you it was going to sound super simple. But listen, this might be the biggest superpower that we all have that we don't use. Again, going back to the fact that we were created in the image of a God who speaks things into existence, when you look at the word encouragement, what it means literally is to create courage in somebody else with your words. Your words have creative power, and you can create courage in someone else simply by what you say to them. Literally, encouragement is the act of giving someone else confidence. And when you pair that with the directional power that your tongue has, your word of encouragement could be the exact thing somebody needs to keep going. You know, I told you about how that girl in middle school told me that I was awkward. Well, that wasn't the only time I was told that throughout my middle school and high school career. And so I kind of internalized that. Right? I'm introverted, and so I'm not Mr. Small Talk. You know, I'm sure some of you have talked to me in the foyer, and the reality is that I just don't have a whole lot to say. It's not that I don't want to talk, I just don't have a whole lot to say. And so sometimes that's awkward. And so when I started to feel called to ministry, I immediately, in the back of my mind, was like, God has the wrong person. Because I had this idea of what a pastor was and what it took to be a pastor. You know, there's somebody that's comfortable being in the center of the attention. There's somebody that's really good at going and talking with people and having coffee. And I had this idea, and I did not feel like it matched up to who I was. but I wanted to be faithful to his leading anyway. And so in spite of those doubts, I took a few steps, and I was asked to share my first devotional in a youth group. And I was so excited, and I was so nervous. You would have thought that I was being asked to share the closing session of Passion Conference to 20,000 college students. In reality, it was 4 high school girls and an adult leader. And so, like I said, I was so excited, but I was so nervous. I had all that, like, you're awkward, you're weird, you're socially awkward, and I was really worried. I was going to get up there. I was going to feel awkward. My feeling awkward was going to make them feel awkward. Them feeling awkward is going to make me feel really awkward until I just wanted to disappear. And so I got up. I shared what I feel like God had me to share. I sat back down, and it was fine. It wasn't necessarily great, and it wasn't terrible. So in my books at that point, that was a win. Fast forward a few years, I go to school for ministry, and I had applied to a ministry job and been turned down. And if you've ever been in a situation like that, you know what a blow to your confidence that can be. And again, when I've already got doubts swirling around in my head, and then I get told, no, you're not the person that we want for this position, it really had me questioning whether or not I heard God correctly. And I was considering, like, hey, it's not too late to back out. It's not too late to go a different direction. It's not too late to pursue another dream. And at that point in time, it was graduation season, not unlike it is kind of now. And one of the girls that was in the room that night, I shared my first devotional. She was graduating high school. So my wife and I went to her grad party. We were, celebrating, hanging out. And then her dad calls me over to come talk to him. And he has a real serious look on his face. And he goes, hey, man, I've been wanting to talk to you for several months now. And my first thought was like, oh, crap, what did I do? And he said, I don't know if anybody ever told you this before, but my daughter says that it was a devotional that you shared years ago where she put her faith in Jesus and her faith became real for her. And so I don't know if anybody's ever told you that, so I just wanted to say thank you and that God's definitely using you. And can I tell you, his words were the exact thing I needed to hear to keep going. His word of encouragement was right on time. His words had directional power in my life. When I was thinking about quitting, when I was thinking about going a different direction, his words showed up and helped me back onto the path I was supposed to be on. Your words have that power. And so maybe one of the most mature things all of us can do when it comes to our words is when we think something good, say it. Sounds so simple. But if you think something good, say it. Because I wonder how many times I have robbed somebody of the blessing that they needed. How many times have I robbed someone of the encouragement that they needed because I was just like, they're good. They know they're doing a good job. They know they're all right. And so often we do that. Man, they see that they're doing good. They see that God's using them. They see how they've grown. What if they don't? What if they don't? And our words could be the wind at their back, pushing them on to more. So tip number 1 to yoke your tongue is encouragement. And the second one is like it. It is encouragement. Encouragement. How you speak about yourself matters. And I'm willing to bet all of us understand that we should be kind with our words to other people, that we should be encouraging with our words to other people, and yet I'm also willing to bet a lot of us speak to ourselves in ways we would never dare speak to somebody else. Church, this is not how it should be. How you speak about yourself matters. And I learned this firsthand a few years ago. And I've shared this with our church before, but a few years back, I was in a real tough season. I was struggling in my confidence. I feel like I share stories that I'm struggling often. I promise like 99% of the time I'm fine. I promise. You don't need to be concerned about me. But in this particular season, it was just a rough patch where I didn't feel like God was using me. I felt like I kind of had reached my potential, and I just felt kind of stuck. And so I did what you should do when you're in a season like that. I went and talked to somebody wiser and more mature than me. I went and talked to Pastor Russ. And he gave me a lot of encouragement. He gave me some good advice. And then he gave me something I really wasn't looking for in this conversation, which was homework. He said, hey, the way you talk about yourself is not okay. He said, man, when you get one little tiny thing wrong, you beat yourself up for weeks over it. And then when you do something right, you don't even give yourself any credit. No wonder you're discouraged. No wonder you feel down. No wonder you feel like you're not getting anything right. That's what you're telling yourself. So you need to start using your words more positively. So what you're going to do is you're going to go home over the next week. You're going to start writing down some positive things about yourself, and then you're going to start saying those things out loud. And I had the response, as probably a lot of us do when we've heard this before, is, ew. Can I tell you, how sad is it that we feel weird about talking positively about ourselves? How sad is that? That we're just so accustomed to beating ourselves up that the idea of saying, hey, I might be good at something feels yucky. And so, if I remember the story correct, Pastor Russ, you can correct me. We met the next week, and it was one of those things I kind of was hoping that he forgot. He told me to do that. So we meet the next week, and he goes, "Where, you got your decorations?" And I was like, ew. Nope. He goes, you got to do this. And so, again, because I respect Pastor Russ, I went home and I did it. And I'll be honest with you, I found another pastor who put his out, and I copied most of them. I was cheating on homework as an adult. So I came back and I said, hey, here's what I've got. I borrowed some. I made some of them up myself, but here's what I got. He said, okay, good. Now, every morning before you get out of bed, you're going to get that note out and you're going to say them out loud. And I said, no, thank you. That's weird. And he, in a nice but firm way, said, you need to do this. And so I did. And again, like I said, I've shared this with our church before, but I want to show you what my list was. Let's go ahead and put that up on the screen. This is copied from the note that I still have in my phone. This is what I read over myself every morning. This is what it is. I would say, this is me. Jesus is first in my life. I exist to honor him. I love my wife, and I will lay down my life to serve her. I love my boys, and I will do so in a way that gives them a glimpse of how loved they are by their Heavenly Father. I will never sacrifice my family on the altar of ministry, but I will demonstrate what it looks like to serve enthusiastically and faithfully in the house of the Lord. I don't have to be perfect because his grace is. Christ is in me. I am enough. I love people and believe the best about them. They are my purpose. I am anointed, empowered, equipped, and called to reach people who are far from God. I am creative, innovative, driven, focused, and blessed beyond measure because the Holy Spirit dwells within me. I am a leader. It's not something I do, it's who I am. I bring my best and then some. I wake up with purpose, meaning, and direction every day of my life. I have nothing to lose and nothing to prove, and the world will be different and better because I serve Jesus today. And I got to see over months firsthand how I started saying that and something weird happened. I started to believe it. The words we say matter. And you know what's funny is that was my list I read about me, but I feel like you hearing me say that probably gave you a little bit of a boost. Our words matter. You know, I've shared this before, and several of you asked me later, hey, I want your list. I want to start saying that. Well, this time I put it on the screen. So if you want it, take a picture of it. And this is actually something I've started doing with both my sons as well. I have a 6-year-old named Milo and a 3-year-old named Cooper, and they're the best kids ever. I actually started this when Milo was 3 years old. And it actually came out of kind of a challenging situation he went through. He got in trouble at school. He was in his first year of preschool, pre-K 3, and he got sent to the principal's office one day. And it was one of those things, what he actually did was more funny than it was bad. It was not a big deal. It's kind of one of those moments as a parent you have to hold in your laughter. It's like, it's not appropriate to laugh right now. But you remember getting in trouble at school for the first time. It's a big deal to a kid. It matters a lot, and especially to a 3-year-old. And so I could tell that it was bothering him. I could tell his wheels were still spinning later that night. And as we are going to bed, I'm sitting on the edge of his bed. He's tucked in, laying there, and I could just see it in his eyes. He was still turning and thinking and wrestling with it. And so we're talking about it. And I will never forget his little 3-year-old hazel eyes looking up at me and saying, "Daddy, does this mean that I'm a bad boy now?" And can I tell you, as a father, that was devastating to hear. Because looking at my little boy, who I have nothing but love for, who I see nothing but potential in, not for a second did him getting sent to the principal's office change a thing about the way I see him. And yet now, because of a moment where he made a mistake, he is now wrestling with the fact of whether or not he's good or bad. And man, I wonder if that's exactly how God feels when we speak poorly about ourselves. He feels like a father that has nothing but love for his children, that sees nothing but potential in his children, that has grace that is unending for his children, and yet we sit in our failure and wonder, am I even worth it? And with our words, we tear ourselves down when that is the exact opposite of what our Father says about us. And so that night, Milo and I started a new tradition that we still do. We did it last night. I told him, buddy, you are not a bad boy at all. You are a good boy. That's why I tell you that all the time. But believe it or not, the words that you say about yourself really matter. Even when you're a little kid, the words you say about yourself really matter. And so, buddy, we're going to do something. And it's going to be a little weird. It's going to feel a little awkward. But I promise that it's going to help you. And so he shook his head, yes. I said, okay, buddy, put your hand on your heart. And he did. And now, like I said, the words you say matter. And so I want you to say, I'm a good boy. And he, like many of us, didn't want to. He shook his head. He pinched his lips shut. And I said, buddy, I know this is weird, but you gotta say it, and you gotta say it out loud. It matters. Your words matter, and I know that doesn't make any sense right now, but I promise someday it will. And so eventually he squeaked out, I'm a good boy. And I said, okay. I want you to say it again, and I want you to say it like it's true, because it is. And then his little 3-year-old squeaky voice said, I'm a good boy. And as he said it, his eyes got a little glassy, because even as a 3-year-old, he understood the power of speaking positively about yourself, of saying what your Father says is true about you. And so here today, I want to do something that might seem a little weird, that might feel a little awkward, but I promise it's going to help. I want everybody in here right at your seat. I want you to put your hand on your heart. And maybe just for a moment, picture that you're a little kid. Because a lot of the lies that we have all begun to believe about ourselves were planted in our hearts when we were a kid. Whether it was a parent, a teacher, a friend, a bully, something they said about you that is not true has taken root. And so we, like small children, are going to say together the things that our Father says about us. Like I said, it's going to feel a little weird, but I want you to say these things repeat after me like they're true because they are. And I want you to internalize it, not just, yeah, this is true for the person down the road. No, this is you. This is you. So, repeat after me. I am loved. Nope. There are so many of us in this room that are still saying, I can say that until I'm blue in the face, but I don't know if it's true about me. And it is my prayer that through the Holy Spirit, the lie that has taken root in your heart would be dug up and replaced with the truth of how your Father sees you. So again, like we mean it, like it's real, like it's the truth. I am loved. My life has meaning. I have God-given potential. The world is a better place with me in it. My past doesn't define me. This storm is temporary. I will make it. Come on. I will make it. You see, this matters because Jesus promised us that in this life we're going to face trouble. And there are some of us that are trying to wade through stormy seasons right now. And because of our words, we're trying to fight with one or two hands tied behind our back. Some of us need to start using our words as a weapon to fight back in the situation that we are in. Instead of saying, man, I don't see the end of this. I don't know how this is ever going to turn out okay. I think God has completely forgotten about me. I don't know if he loves me anymore. I don't know if I'm worth it anymore. We got to stop saying that. We have got to start speaking the truth. God loves me. God sees me. And even though this storm, I can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, I know that he works all things for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. And that is me. And listen, I just want to remind you real quick of what James said in verse 4 about your tongue. He said it is a small rudder. It makes a huge ship turn wherever the pilot chooses to go. Listen to this. Even though the winds are strong. You might be facing some tough oppositional wind. You might be in the middle of a season where you feel like God has lost you. But can I encourage you? Start using your words to speak life, to speak hope, speak purpose to the situation you are in right now. And I just want to show you just a quick case study of how David in the Psalms did that. David in Psalm 42, verses 9 through 11, he says this, and in verse 9 to 10, he sounds like maybe a lot of us do. Oh God, my rock, I cry, why have you forgotten me? Why must I wander around in grief, oppressed by my enemies? Their taunts break my bones. They scoff, where is this God of yours? And then in verse 11, his tone shifts. And this is what we got to start doing more of. He says, why am I discouraged? Why is my heart so sad? I will put my hope in God. I will praise him again, my Savior and my God. Come on, stand up to your feet with me. And there are so many of us that have let an outside situation change the dialogue that happens on the inside. And there are some of us that we have got to commit today to say, hey, I'm not gonna allow the directional power of my words to be hijacked any longer. But I'm gonna start using my words to encourage myself. If my situation is discouraging, if the diagnosis is discouraging, if my bank account is discouraging, I'm gonna start just being encouraging to myself.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this message. I hope that it encouraged you and inspired your faith. If God is doing something in your life, would you take a moment and let us know? We want to connect with you and we want to be able to pray for you. All you have to do is shoot us an email to hello@thex.church, or you can always send us a DM on one of our social media platforms. And if you know somebody that would also be encouraged by this very message, why not take a moment and just share it with them right now? And as always, I want to say thank you to every single person who so generously financially supports this ministry so we can continue to get messages like these out to people all over the world. We believe God is building something special and you're a significant part of it. Until next time, have a great day.